We are very uncertain about our future, and a large number of us really don't know what our culture is. But if you don't know your identity, you're in big trouble. And the reality is, many of us are losing sight of what our identity is and what it truly means to have an identity. So I'm going to ask you a question at the beginning of this. And by the end of it, I hope your opinion as to what the answer will be changes. What do you feel is your identity? And with that, I shall begin. So, a large number of us feel that identity is comprised of very arbitrary factors. Things like your nationality, things like your race, things like your religious affiliation, things like your cultural background, things like your parenting, things like, as people have said before, the career which you wish to become. Or maybe it's more personal than that. Maybe it's things like you fighting for a social cause or a social movement because you're an individual who's been suppressed by the society around you. Or maybe it's a gender identity because your ability to express your gender has been suppressed all this while. But all of these things share one thing in common. They're collective identities. In my speech, I'm going to show you why we should put more emphasis on our individual identities, things that are ours and only ours. So, a lot of you are thinking right now, or might be thinking right now, and some people out there are probably thinking, what is this guy talking about? How can we, have individual identities? Aren't all identities just subsets of the groups and societies which we have climbed to over time? I think not. I think that many people think that collective identities are important for some reasons. Obviously, your parenting has a large impact on your experiences and how you grow up as a child, and it shapes the way you think and the way you act. Obviously, your religious affiliation, to a large degree, shapes your worldview, or the nature in which you perceive morality, and the way in which you aspire or believe to a higher power. Obviously, your nationality is incredibly important because it represents the pride in your country and often the culture which you're exposed to as a person. Your gender is also incredibly important because it expresses in the way in which you interact with people and the way in which you understand yourself as a person and the level of confidence which you have. And the list goes on and on. Political identities are incredibly important because they define the way in which you interact with wider society. They shape the way in which you see society to be fit, and they shape the way in which you influence other people's decisions, whether you be liberal, conservative, or moderate. But all of these identities, at the end of the day, are just identities that were made for you. They were already there to begin with. Your culture, your race, your religion, your nationality, your gender, your parenting, your occupation were all there to begin with. These are all things that existed before you had a choice to exist to them. So in reality, all of these things aren't really yours. So when you say, my culture or my identity, we need to be thinking about what is your culture and your identity, and not the culture and identity which you have sort of bought into, or that you sort of opt into, and for many people, unfortunately, have been forced into. Individual identities are often the things which you find to be insignificant. They're often the things like your casual conversations, what you think about when you're just sitting down and have nothing much to do. And your mind is just buzzing about with all of these thoughts. But all of these thoughts are reflective of that individual identity because they're all subconscious. There's no external influence that's guiding the way you think or guiding the way you act. These are all things that you define yourself because they're just your thoughts. Or probably even more specific, the things you dream of at night. Those are definitely individual identities because each dream is uniquely tailored to your thoughts because it's just a subconscious representation of what you've been thinking about all this while. And all of those things are probably more important to your identity than all these labels of race, culture, religion, nationality, etc. Because all of those things are actually yours. Someone can't come up and tell you, you need to dream in this way because dreams are a part of the culture which we as a collective respect. No, no. Your dreams are yours. Your dreams are your identity, and only you, and some people even can't influence their dreams, but if anyone could influence your dreams, it's you. If anyone can influence your thoughts, it's you. We don't have mind control, so for the time that we are on here, we are truly in control of the thoughts that we have. We are the only people who can really understand identity through the thoughts that we have. Now, I think collective identities may have their place, because it's obviously very difficult to live in a society where you have absolutely no conception of race or religion or parenting or nationality. But it's important to recognize that they're not actually what makes you you. So picture this. You're at a famous sandwich chain where you have to make the sandwich sort of on a counter, and you have different ingredients you have to pick up. So you start off with the bread, and that bread's sort of the virtue of your birth. It's things like your nationality, your race, and your religion. It's things that you start off with. You move along and you have like a main base that you put on it. It could be meat or it could be something vegetarian. And that's the things like your religious identity and your gender identity. Those are things that are formed, but they're things that you really can't choose to control. And then you move on further and you have things like the vegetables, things like your tomatoes, your lettuce, your onions, your pickles, if you like pickles. And all of these things are the stuff you put into it, but still, you're still going to put something into it, and often those decisions are influenced by the choices you have available. So these things end up being your political identity, the occupation you want to be. And for the vast majority of people, these things are heavily controlled by the options that are available to them, by their backgrounds or by where they come from. But you still have slightly more control over them as your intrinsic characteristics. And then you move on further along to the sandwich chain, and you end up with the sauce that you sprinkle on top, like that last bit of sauce. And that last bit of sauce is incredibly important, because it's the only bit on that sandwich that is definitely going to be different for each person. Unless somehow you have a robot that's actually able to squeeze the exact same amount of sauce on the sandwich. But in reality, when you have humans, serving sandwiches, the layer of the sauce is always going to be different. And that's important, because even though it's a really thin layer, it's things that you don't see as significant. Things like your dreams, things like your internal thoughts, things like your deep desires. All of these things are probably more important to your identity, because that's the only thing that makes you different from all the other sandwiches that people would have made. So, if I take me as an example, I'm one out of 1.1 or 1.2 billion people of my religion. I'm one of less than a billion, 0.8, 0.9 of my race. I'm one of around 32 million people of my nationality. I'm one of around 100,000 people of my nationality, of my occupation. And the list keeps going on and on. But eventually, by sticking to these categories, you still don't narrow it down to zero. If you only take it from the preconceived labels, there will always be people who are like you. There will be people who go to international schools. There will be people who have the same ambitions as you. There are people who have the same structure of parenting as you. But your dreams, your thoughts, I am one of one who has my dreams. I am one of one who has my thoughts. And that's important, because those are the things that make you, you. And we seem to lose track of the fact that we define identities, because we always seem to want to fulfill the expectations of the identities that were created for us. Excuse me. We always seem to feel like, I need to be part of my culture, or I need to act my culture. There's always that feeling that compels you to do or act in a way in which you feel is appropriate to your culture, and that pushes you into those brackets. You often feel that your parents are people who you need to make proud, and therefore your occupation is influenced by you making your parents proud. Your race or your religion are things that you really don't have much control over, because you just happen to be born into them. But you're expected to act or follow in the way that these identities are set out for you. So they're not really your identities. because they're created for you, and you change who you are to follow them. And many people have changed who they are to follow an identity which they themselves don't really understand. But if we all just stopped and identified ourselves as just human, I know that's a very millennial term, but if we all stopped and identified ourselves as just human, it'd be so much better. We wouldn't have to worry about, oh, I need to fulfill my obligation to this party or that party, or this country or that country, or this religious affiliation or that religious affiliation, or our parents, or whoever we feel controls identity, really. We'll just be ourselves. Because we're all different, but we're all human. And that's the only thing we really know. Thank you.